What would you do if you had no food, no help, and two babies crying in your arms? Would you make a choice no mother should ever have to make? Today we share a story of a young mother pushed to the edge, who gave away her twin daughters to a stranger, thinking for the better, or so she thought. 20 years later, the truth, a hidden secret, came back to her doorstep. Listen to today's narrative until the end, and please also let us know where you're listening from. Grace Whitaker was just 21 when desperation backed her into a corner no mother should ever face. Abandoned by Daniel Westbrook, the man who vanished the moment he learned she was pregnant, Grace found herself raising twin daughters alone. Lila and Ivy, with their golden curls and ocean blue eyes, were angels born into suffering. She lived in a decaying shack on the outskirts of Willow Creek, Georgia. The roof leaked, the floor was cold, and food was a luxury she couldn't afford. The nights were the hardest. Each morning, she faced the same nightmare: empty cupboards, a shrinking hope, and the constant ache of failure. One rainy afternoon, Grace stood outside St. Mary's General Hospital, clutching the twins in a tattered blanket, seeking help. That's when Margot Lancaster appeared. Flawless, wealthy, and cold as marble. Stepping out of a sleek black SUV, she paused and gazed at the girls. "They're perfect," she whispered. Margot offered a deal: full custody in exchange for financial support and the promise of a better life for the girls. Grace recoiled at first, but Margot's calm, calculated words began to take root. That night, Grace stared at her daughters and wondered, was keeping them in poverty an act of love or cruelty? 3 days later, after countless sleepless nights and hours spent staring at her daughters as they slept, Grace made the hardest call of her life. Her hands trembled as she held the phone. Her heart pounded with guilt and fear. "I'll do it," she whispered, barely audible, her voice breaking under the weight of every sacrifice she was about to make. The Hawthorne estate was everything Willow Creek was not: grand, warm, filled with music and light. Lila and Ivy grew up in a world of silk sheets, piano recitals, and globe-spanning vacations. Their names were written in gold on birthday invitations and engraved on ballet trophies. Yet beneath the wealth, something was wrong. They couldn't explain the ache in their hearts or the sense of something missing. Questions were discouraged. When Ivy once asked where they came from, Margot snapped, "You're mine. That's all that matters." Her tone was final, like a slammed door that echoed through their lives. But children are curious, and secrets don't stay buried forever. At age 8, curiosity cracked the illusion. While playing hide-and-seek in the attic, Lila stumbled upon a dusty, forgotten box tucked behind old trunks. Inside were faded photographs, aged receipts, and a torn picture of a young woman holding 2 newborns. The back of the photo held a short, aching message: "Forgive me. I love you, Mom." Lila felt the world tilt beneath her feet. That moment, quiet and surreal, became the first crack in the facade Margot had so carefully constructed. Margot's wrath was immediate. She destroyed the box, screamed that it was a lie, and forbade the girls from ever speaking of it again. But Lila had already hidden part of the photo. Ivy cried that night, and their childhood began to change. The girls became silent observers. They noticed the inconsistencies, the evasions, the way Margot panicked when they asked about their early years. By 17, they were sure Margot was not their birth mother. They hired Aaron Chandler, a lawyer who specialized in family reunification. All they had was a name, Grace Whitaker, but it was enough. Grace now worked at Second Chances Cafe, a fitting name for a woman who'd never forgiven herself. Every April 15th, she lit 2 candles on 2 tiny cupcakes and sang to the memory of her daughters. That spring day, the bell above the cafe door rang. In walked Lila and Ivy, poised and elegant. Grace turned, dropped a mug, and froze. "Are you Grace Whitaker?" No sound escaped her lips. Tears welled. Lila produced her half of the photo. Grace reached into her apron and unfolded the other. The pieces fit, time stopped, and the mother who had wept for 20 years held her daughters again. Soon joy turned to fear. A thick envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a lawsuit. Margot was suing them. Breach of contract, defamation, breaking confidentiality. Every word felt like a slap. Grace clutched the letter with trembling hands. The panic set in quickly. What if she lost her daughters again? What if the law sided with the woman who had everything? But Lila stood firm, her eyes steady with resolve. "She knows we found you, and she's scared." Then came unexpected help. Walter Granger, Margot's accountant, confessed he had kept records of everything: forged documents, under-the-table payments, illegal arrangements. Raymond Cole, Margot's former driver, added more to the unraveling story. He came forward hesitantly at first, burdened by years of guilt and silence. But once he began to speak, the truth spilled out like a dam breaking. He remembered the night vividly, the icy wind slicing through his coat, and the heart-wrenching image of 2 sleeping infants being carried into a mansion that felt more like a fortress. He had kept mementos and records without fully understanding why, perhaps a subconscious attempt to preserve the truth. There were photos from that night, capturing the precise moment the transfer happened at the gates of the Hawthorne estate. He had audio recordings of brief exchanges with Margot. And most importantly, he maintained a detailed journal, filled with dates, names, times, and unsettling details that no one else had ever seen. It was undeniable. The pieces were coming together like a puzzle, finally forming a clear picture. A case was building, one that could bring Margot's entire empire to its knees. The courtroom was filled with reporters and whispers. Margot arrived with a team of high-priced attorneys. Grace stood with her daughters and Aaron. On the stand, Grace trembled but didn't break. "I didn't sell them," she said. "I sold my last hope that they wouldn't starve." Aaron presented the documents, the recordings, and the timeline of lies. The judge was stunned. The audience gasped. Margot didn't speak. Her empire was crumbling. After the trial, a stranger knocked on Grace's door, Daniel Westbrook. Older now, richer, but hollow-eyed. "I ran," he said, "but I never stopped thinking about you, about them." He showed them letters, old baby shoes, and a wallet photo he'd carried for years. But the most shocking revelation was this. "I told Margot about you. I thought she was going to help. I didn't know. I never imagined she would twist everything into something so dark." Grace's legs gave out beneath her, and she collapsed into a chair, the weight of his words pressing down like a storm. Her mind reeled, trying to process the betrayal layered upon the pain she'd already endured. She had suffered for years, believing she alone had failed her daughters. The girls looked at their father, their expressions a mix of confusion, anger, and something softer, hope maybe, or the desperate desire to believe he was telling the truth. Trust would take time, but for the first time, it felt possible. With Daniel's testimony, new charges were filed: human trafficking, fraud, coercion. The court froze Margot's assets. Lila and Ivy used part of the settlement to establish the Whitaker Hope Foundation, supporting vulnerable mothers facing desperation. Grace became its honorary director. Daniel donated half his wealth. The girls shared their story publicly. Ivy, in tears on national TV, said, "We were separated by circumstance, but love brought us home." While unpacking books one day, Grace found an envelope, yellowed, sealed, and addressed to her. Inside was a letter from Eleanor Hastings, Margot's late mother. "I encouraged my daughter to adopt your twins. I thought it would heal her grief, to fill the void left behind by her own tragedy. In my mind, I believed we were saving them, and giving you a second chance too. But I was wrong. I watched you cry in that hospital, and I still turned away. I chose silence over compassion. I saw your pain and pretended it wasn't my burden to carry. I'm sorry for the role I played and for not doing what was right when it mattered most." Grace wept. It was a cruel kind of closure, but closure nonetheless. The Hawthorne estate was sold. Proceeds went to the foundation. Grace published a memoir, sold but not lost. It became a beacon of hope for mothers and daughters everywhere. Lila and Ivy became licensed therapists, specializing in family trauma. Grace lives with them now, surrounded by the love she thought was lost forever. Every April 15th now, they light candles together, not in sorrow, but in thanks. Before you go, what would you have done in Grace's place? Could you walk away from your children if it meant giving them a better life? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you watched until now, comment, "I believe in second chances." Please do subscribe to our channel for more such narratives, and thank you for listening to Storyline Narratives.